oblivion. And so thought I'd do in this paper is maybe take on some of the highbrow contemporary anti-intellectualism as a case in point, what I would call the new laissez-faire sophists on truth. That is, cultural neoliberals about truth. That is, optimistic postmodernists. First claim, there is no such thing as big T truth. This comes out of modernity, the idea of God is dead, then nature, then man. Nietzsche, God is dead. Foucault, man is dead. Big truth is dead. This is the modern break with the pre-modern religious order based on theism. Step one. Second one, and I've heard this floated around many times, many little T truths. This comes from nihilistic postmodernism, draws on Friedrich Nietzsche. Truth as a mobile army of metaphors, a hammer to smash idols. An optimistic postmodernism from William James. An idea is true if it is profitable to our lives. Truth has cash value and lives on the credit system. Another word for this position is called multi-perspectivism. However, note, such claims that about no big T truth and many little T truths come together, but they themselves are big T truth claims. This radical relativism lives uneasily with an express absolute certainty in it. Picture it as a rowboat with two oars. It can only move forward with ignorance of the connection, and one alone takes it in a circle back to the other. It is this contradiction is challenged as unintelligible, incoherent, or contradictory thesis, are defended as a virtue, as an ironical stance in a paradoxical world. Postmodernists are again absolute, universal, or objective claims except for themselves. As Habermas pointed out, paradoxically they somehow keep believing in the authority and superiority of philosophical insights, their own. This is when a good Zen master, I would say, would whack them with a stick. But restrictions on such behavior requires my silent withdrawal from the conversation. A symbolically terroristic effect, as intended and argued by Jean-Paul Lyotard in The Postmodern Condition. Third, to fix the relativism in a place requires locating community of practice. This democratic populist turn breaks with Nietzsche's and Foucault's aristocratic aestheticism. We thus get a democratic populism times optimistic postmodernism with an intellectual lobotomy, locating truth in the doxa or opinion of the demos. With critique sufficiently cordoned off, the turn to demos implies a cultural turn to ethos, which itself can be more tyrannical from a majority and anti-democratic for subordinated minorities. But once this is recognized, we get to the fourth step. Minorities thus can locate so-called critical challenges to the majority power to normalize the other. However, claims to otherness tied to victimization, a marginalization required, and inclusion of diversity within the demos raises a sticky wicket. What to do about those others, not so nice marginalized minorities? Cannibals, serial killers, KKKers, rich tycoons, religious fundamentalists, and the long ignored list goes on and on. Which marginality to privilege ethically? However, Badiou might ask, and he did, what if the other is stupid? Step 5. Intellectual critique is further reduced to ethical disputes based on communities of difference. You have your truth, and I have mine as communities. Ethos, or ethical communication, is transformed to ethnos, ethnic communities. This actually parallels Huntington's thesis of the clash of civilizations. Huntington is a neoconservative right-winger, by the way, in the same model scripted on the international geopolitical scene. Step 6. The shift to the absoluteness of the cultural disputes forms an alliance in the postmodern approach to truth, with radical relativism and absolute certainty as the two oars on the same boat, the boat of the new absolute God, called language as being. This ends with Derrida's boat sinking in the limits of deconstruction regarding responsibility, justice, and other key transcendent truths which he claimed were non-deconstructible at the end of his life. Thus, Francis Heidegger, in the Derridian synthesis of hermeneutic phenomenology from Hegel, Husserl, and Heidegger, and the vitalist post-structuralists through Nietzsche, Bergson, and Foucault, These traditions mark the triumphal return from the absence to a new mysticism, metaphysics, religion, theology, and opens the way for pre-modern fundamentalist religions to lay claim to absolute truth once again without a defense against it. 7. An uneasy alliance exists now, strangely, between religious fundamentalists and postmodern populists. What started as the death of God ends with the triumph of God. Competing big T truths which no one believes in except their own. We are now in a time of political theologies. Let's not leave language as the real God to lay only at the feet of hermeneutes and vitalists. It is also shared with hegemonic position on truth, the analytical logicists and positivists, from Hume, Kant to later Wittgenstein, whose agnosticism on big T truth also started the beating down and the bending of little t truths in a finite, bounded logic rooted in senses and language. So the problem here from all of them is the privileging of knowledge, language, and meaning, and constitutes what I would broadly call the constructivist approach to truth. It is not the oars on the boat, but the boat itself that is the problem. Now, this is a broader critique of constructivism. I'm not going to go into too much, but what I want to do is talk a little bit about where we go from here in terms of drawing on the work of Alain Badiou. And in this, I think it's important to remember to draw on a kind of what's called the modified realism on big T truth, which retains many of the insights of the postmodernist challenge without having to turn confusion, irony, or terror into a virtue or a fear, and to commit to a big G good will not bring you with it a big B bad. So in terms of Badiou's thesis, he talks about three kinds of truths. One which we could call a little t truth in quotation marks, which he calls the encyclopedic notion of truth, which equates truth with knowledge and verification. I think we're all familiar with this. This is the one we get in our methods classes. In terms of, this is a very common understanding, and this centers all the epistemological debates between positivists, hermeneutic phenomenologists, postmodernists, and traditional realists. In some ways, Badiou shares a common understanding with Foucault on this, on the nature and functioning of truth regimes. However, what Badiou does not share with these people, and shares with the traditional realists, is that you cannot be agnostic on big T truth, nor can you reduce it to language. Its sense, meaning, or power, respectively articulated by those positions. Second, he has what might be called a little t truth, not in quotation marks. And the quotation marks, I'm the one who put that in marks you will. And this is what he calls social logical truths that emerge from the condition-specific truth procedures that create scientific innovation, political revolution, artistic creation, and amorous love. Here, truth is not verifiability, but veritas, with verifiability of the event through historical fidelity to the event. These social logical truths appear as what he calls wholes in knowledge. Truth is not knowledge, truth is a whole in knowledge, each in their own particularity, but verified through fidelity to the event's occurrence. In this sense, truth is something that happens. It's a smack in the head, a blow in the gut, a mystical blue moon insight. As anyone who has fallen in love knows, you never see it coming. It is exceptional, it is particular, and it is universal if it is true. Badiou's position on these sociological truths shares some similarity to Heidegger's transcendental critical realism, thus the title of his seminal book, Being and Event, where from the void of presence, a truth is known as being there. But he doesn't slip into historicism, transcendentalism, nor privileging poetry and maligning science, as does Heidegger as the site of truth. Third, finally, Badiou reconceives what we might call philosophical big T truth and defends it as a militant atheist against sophists, romantics, and postmodernists, as well as many others. In a clearing, philosophy works with the truths originating from the void in the conditions of science, politics, art, and love, to gather them, somewhat similarly to Bashkar's notion of underlaboring. Fidelity to the event of big T truth is a Pascalian wager, and the commitment makes the truth, following Lacan and Marx, an act of a subject with subjectification originating between body and language as something that arises from nothing.